Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Brilliantly Resilient Live. I am beyond overwhelmed and excited today to bring you two guys who did a film with another buddy of ours called Hell or High Seas. And I'm not going to get into the explanation of it right now because they have to just tell you their story. So Kristen and I want to welcome Stephen O'Shea and Taylor Grieger. Guys, it's just such a pleasure to meet you. Your journey was beyond inspirational to me, not only because of the journey itself, but because of what it means. So I'm going to give you a minute to introduce yourselves, tell everybody how you met, and then we want to talk about the film.
Right on. Thank you for having us. It's really cool getting to chat about it. Yeah, I'm Taylor Grieger, and I'm a sailor. I sailed down here in Kima, Texas. It's just south of Houston, if people don't know where that is. And that's all we're up to now. We talk about the film and sail veterans around.
And Stephen, you guys met in high school, I think, right?
Correct. Yeah. So we were actually on the swim team together in high school down here in Texas. And then we went our separate ways. Taylor went into the Navy, into the military, and I kind of went into academia. And we reconnected while I was doing my PhD in Scotland. And that's when Taylor reached out and he'd found some of my writing online. Because at the time I was researching and interviewing combat veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan. So Taylor kind of found some of that writing online, and he pulled me to tell the story of female helicopters in Guam where he was stationed, which ended up being just, really compelling material. And that made it into my book. And we reconnected while I was in Guam down there and kind of conceived the idea for the journey that would become Hell or High Seas.
Now, at that point, Taylor, were you out of the service at that point when you guys reconnected?
I was still active duty. I still had a year left on my contract, a little less than a year. Yeah.
Okay, so now this whole story has its roots in what happened to you after you left the service. So I want to hear that part of the story. Talk about that.
All right. Yeah. Whenever I first got out of the military, first couple months were all right. It was nice being free again, able to go wherever I wanted and not have to be accountable to anyone. It was a lot of fun. It was really cool. And then for me, it was about the third month. I started noticing my body was acting weird. Adrenaline would start running in my body for no reason at all. I wouldn't be doing anything, and like a rush of adrenaline would come on me. And that was probably one of the scary moments. And then when that started happening, I started kind of, my brain, I'm not a doctor. I can just tell you about what happened to me, but I guess my brain started trying to process what happened overseas, because when you're over there, especially when you fly, and you go to these briefs before you go fly, and you kind of talk to everybody as a crew, and whatever you have going on in your personal life or whatever happened on your flight beforehand, there's a common term you use. You've got to compartmentalize it to do your job. So whatever dark stuff you're going through or whatever happened to you, you just tell each other, like, put it in the back, you got a job to do. So if you do that, so I did that for 6 years, right? I did that for 6 years, just putting everything off and not letting my body process what happened. And so the third month, when my adrenaline started running and my brain, I feel like, started processing what happened overseas. And my body would just run away from me. I would find myself thinking about, stuff that happened overseas. And then when my adrenaline was running, I just felt out of control. It was honestly really scary. I was scared to say it. It took me a while to admit that, but I was really scared. And whenever that was going on, I ruined about every single relationship I had, pushed everybody away, and, hit the bottom. Obviously, we talk about it in the film, but I called Steven and I was like, dude, I'm lost, man. I don't know how to live anymore. Have you seen any guys that you've talked to in your interviews for your book? Have they gone through this? Have you heard, is this normal? Have you heard about this before? And that's whenever he told me, he's like, every single person I've interviewed says the exact same thing you did.
Wow.
You're not alone, and it's a real problem. And that really lit the fire for the documentary. That's that between Stephen and I, like, there was no question. We need to tell everybody else about this. because I didn't know. I had no idea what was going to happen to me when I got out. I didn't think I was going to have a problem at all. I was in the military and I lost several of my friends to suicide, and I didn't understand it. I didn't get it. I guess my brain didn't comprehend it. That when I'd get out, I have a problem. I didn't think I was going to have a problem. It just happened. And so when Steven and I were talking, we we're like, we got to make sure everybody knows about this. Everybody gets out, knows what's going to happen to them, so they can be prepared. So they're not taken by surprise by it, and they know how to handle it. That there's resources you can go to reach out to help you heal and get better. I had no idea. I didn't think that there was a way to live again. And Steven was the first person that told me that, a civilian, not anybody getting out of the military or anything. And I don't honestly, now that we've been doing this for a while, I don't think it's their fault. I really don't. I think people don't know. And that's why we made this film, to talk about PTSD and how it affects the body on a physiological level. Nobody talks about that at all. But that research has been out since like 2007.
Since 2007, you said? Or 17?
Yeah.
2007. Wow. One of our good friends that has been on the show, and we've become good friends with him, Dr. Lee Warren, he was in Iraq also. He's a neurosurgeon. And he talks about that you have to do self-brain surgery on your own mind, like exactly what you were talking about, Taylor. You compartmentalize for so long and push it all back, and then it starts creeping up. He actually gets a severe pain in his shoulder from an old injury from over in Iraq. And that's when things are going haywire in his life. It starts to manifest that way. But I also want to make sure that our listeners that are hearing this, that it lands with everybody, that you just brought up some very important things that you did. You reached out to somebody and you asked a simple question. Have you ever heard of this before? Which then started your reset and rise by simply asking for help. I want people to really take that in. And especially, it might not be politically correct to say in these days, but you can't keep up with all the rules. But coming from guys, right? And from soldiers, a soldier that you guys everybody kind of thinks that you can compartmentalize and then you can go into these situations and come out and you're okay. And the fact that you're saying, wait a minute, I need some help is huge for the people that haven't been in that situation and feel like they can't ask for help. So I appreciate that you brought that up.
Thanks. There's a lot to unpack there. I appreciate that. But I think this is another thing I've kind of struggled to understand is when you're in the military and you're operating in those environments, I don't think you have time to let your brain decompress. I can think of several times where, like, if I wasn't 100% in what I was doing at that moment, we would have all died for sure. Absolutely. Like if for a second I would have thought about what happened the night before, the day before, we definitely would have died. So I think when you're in that environment, you have to operate like that to stay alive. You've got to be pretty disconnected with your emotions, but there needs to be a program to show you how to decompress after it's all said and done. And there isn't one at all. Because at some point your body's going to try and do it on its own. You need help doing it. Especially whenever you start getting out. I think that would do a world difference for the suicide rate here in the States.
So Stephen, you were working on a book and talking to people, and was PTSD your focus, or was this something that you kind of realized in interviewing these people, that every single person, and this is a point that you guys make in the film that I want people to understand too. We think that PTSD happens to some people. You guys are saying it pretty much happens to everybody. Right.
Yeah. If you're put under the right, or in this case, the wrong set of circumstances, it's, you're going to experiencing these symptoms that Taylor did. And to answer your question, I actually started the research looking into the experience of combat, and it slowly became, the more interesting story in my mind, and the story that wasn't being talked about enough, was actually veterans returning home and their experience of transitioning into civilian life. So what really kind of struck me about Taylor's situation was that my research had been centered almost exclusively on combat veterans, and Taylor had never technically been deployed to a combat zone. Even though, his role in Guam was essentially a first responder, times 10. And then he'd been deployed to disaster relief missions. They're just like countless situations that are easily comparable to a combat situation. And because he had never really experienced that, you know, he wasn't screened in the same way that maybe a combat veteran would have been. And as he was leaving the military, PTSD wasn't even mentioned to him. So that was a big red flag in my mind. And that ended up being a driving force for, you know, the story that we wanted to tell with this documentary.
So it sounds to me like PTSD is almost built in simply because of the high level of, as you said, Taylor, compartmentalization that you need to have in your brain in order to do your job effectively and to even survive. It's almost like you know, this is going to sound ridiculous, but I know when I go on vacation, it takes me a couple of days to chill out. And my biggest stressor is lady in front of me paying with a check in the express line, you know? So like for you guys to be expected to come home from these really highly stressful situations, regardless of whether it's direct combat or not, your jobs are very much compartmentalized and stress-filled. It almost seems like this should be built into an awareness throughout the military. This is something everybody's dealing with, and you're saying it's not.
Yeah, right. So 3 of my really good friends that we deployed with committed suicide, and they were mechanics on our deployments.
They were mechanics, did you say?
They were mechanics. Yeah, they were mechanics. Worked every day on the flight line. And when we deployed, they were on the deck of the aircraft carrier, and then we were on LHD-6 amphibious vessel. Anyways, so when you're on, even if you work on an aircraft carrier every single day, if you're working on a flight line, everything on that thing wants to kill you. You know, there's the catapults run off. Everything with rotors is trying to chop your head off, and you have to live in that stressful environment every day for 9-10 months at a time. Yeah, it's not just combat. It's being in an environment where your body is in a fight or flight mode all day long for years, months at a time. You know, it affects everybody, and that's not what anybody's talking about. That's what we're trying to talk about with the film.
So let's switch to the film. Let's switch gears a little bit here. And I guess what my first question to you is, was this journey intended to be more than a journey at the beginning of it? Or was this for you personally, I have to do something, I have to make a change, and then it kind of evolved into this is an opportunity to highlight the challenges of people trying to transition. Before we get to that, I do want to talk about your experience on the beach and what happened to you that maybe was the pivotal moment in this that changed that experience.
Yeah, I tried to take my own life, try to shoot myself in the head. Around it and go off, and yeah, that was the bottom for me. It was pretty hard. We talk more about it in the film, but from the very beginning, especially after that moment, before Hell or High Seas was even a speck, we were going to go sail, but making a documentary about it wasn't on our radar. And after talk to Stephen about it, the whole goal for the film is to talk about PTSD. The animation that we have that talks about how PTSD affects the body on a physiological level, that's what the film is about. That's why we made the film. The reason we sailed around Cape Horn was we were like, well, if we're going to sail and talk about PTSD and how it affects the body, who's going to want to watch that? We're just on a boat having conversations. Nobody's going to want to watch that. So we're like, well, we're going to have to sail around the baddest thing in the world we can to make it interesting. Try and grab people's attention to want to see it, especially people outside of the military, sailing community, family members, people that have deployed, to help them understand. So if we made something crazy enough that people would want to pay attention to it, maybe they'll take away what PTSD really is. So from the very beginning, the whole goal was to talk about PTSD, to try and reach guys when they get out of the military and let them know that they're not alone feeling that way, and that there's ways to stay alive. There's a reason to live again. That was the point of the film for sure.
I'm sitting here thinking about people that are listening to this, that are sitting in the pit on the beach with metaphorically a gun to their head, or just figuring they're going to step out of life, and the challenge is just too big. And what I want people to realize is, in that moment that you're standing on the beach and that happens, it is the furthest thing from what you would consider the hero in the hero's journey, right? And then you all go into you have that pivotal moment, and then you create this film. And as all our listeners know, and all the movie that are in film and movie storytelling and that love a good film, it's the hero's journey that sucks us in, right? And you're talking about, Taylor, making it interesting and exciting. So I want people to realize, as you're hearing the next part of this interview and this chat with these guys, that Taylor was at that pit moment that a lot of us sit in, sometimes more frequently in a year than others, but then embarks on this hero's journey. Would I go out on the high seas? Probably not. I might think of maybe some roller coasters at a park that go upside down, but anyone can go from that pit feeling the furthest from a hero into their own hero's journey. So let's move into that.
So where you guys, you start this whole journey. And first of all, I want to thank you for naming your boat after me. The boat's called the Old Lady. That was really considerate of you guys. Thank you so much. But you put so much effort into this, and you worked so hard, and multiple times during the journey, things just went to hell in terms of the boat falling apart and those storms that you went through. And, I think, did you at any point recognize that this was kind of metaphorically what your life kind of was? Like, was that an awareness in any, obviously, like you said, you're just trying to keep alive and keep the boat from just completely breaking apart. But at any point, maybe after the fact, did you look at it and go, wow, this is kind of like where my head was, like complete storms, and then you're in these doldrum states? How did that affect you?
Yeah. Steven and I were definitely just trying to stay alive out there. It's kind of, it's, I think, ironic, Steven and I kind of just like, it couldn't have happened any other way, to the point where if there was a hurricane out there, we found it and sailed in it. We sailed through the first ever recorded in our history anticyclone to hit the coast of Chile after the boat caught fire and we were sinking. That's when we sailed into the first recorded hurricane down there in the South Pacific. It was crazy. And then in that moment, we were sitting up on deck and we were like, this couldn't happen any other way. It had to. It was the only way. So after the fact, I think I still feel the same way. It had to happen like that. I don't know, Steven, what do you think?
Oh, yeah. The way things panned out ended up, for better or worse, being a fantastic metaphor. But, Taylor and I would talk kind of at the beginning of this trip about the Odyssey and Odysseus's return home. Mm-hmm. And one thing I always kind of found compelling about that story is that the Trojan War was 10 years long, and then Odysseus's journey home took 10 years, and he did have to go to hell and back. Mm. And so we saw this metaphor of sailing as kind of like the original metaphor for veterans and military personnel returning home. But I didn't expect us to experience all the hardships that Odysseus did. That's for sure.
All in one trip.
Well, if this title and the way that we could do a parallel marketing thing, and we could have another one, same movie, and call it The Hurricane Hunters. On a reality TV thing.
Yeah,
we'd find them.
You have great success. Look, they're the most successful hurricane hunters out there.
There's another movie in the making for you guys. So you had a couple of points in your journey. You had a couple of other buddies join you at different spots, and a couple of things struck me about different things that they said, and particularly John. He had a few moments in the film where he said something about this journey being an opportunity to shed light on people who were crying and not being heard. And I just thought that was such a beautiful way to highlight the plight of people who, give so much. And I think we assume that because of your training, and I think Kristen kind of referenced this before, that because of your training, you're just going to be equipped to be able to handle it. But the point that I think people need to understand, and Steven, I think you talk about this in the film, is that there are actual physiological changes, like in the body and in the brain, that happen because of this. So it's not just something that you can kind of talk yourself out of. There's an actual physical component of this, right?
Yep.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things, one of the stigmas that's attached to PTSD is that it's mental. And what we're finding in, physiological research today is that the mind is interconnected with the body. The hormones that your body releases affect the mind, shape the mind, and have a physical reaction within your body that can be measured. So all of it is inextricably connected to the physical experience, and this, I guess, stigma or idea that it's just something you can put your mind to and you can overcome just by being tougher, is just a farce.
I was also struck a couple of times during the film, Taylor, that you repeatedly said things like, "It's my fault." It's my fault that we're here. It's my fault. In fact, you even kicked the two guys off the boat at one point because you were afraid you were going to kill them inadvertently by one of the trips that you were making. And I wonder, again, is there any part of you as a veteran who comes home and when you find yourself kind of acting out or whatever, is that a mantra that you say, "It's my fault, it's my fault"? Like, that sounds like it's something else that we need to make people understand that it's not their fault.
That's great. Man, that's a good question. Nobody's asked that before. It was different for me. I obviously can't speak to everybody. I can talk about the guys that we sail with our foundation at AMOD. We've had these conversations at length. Whenever I was in that moment, my lowest moments, I felt sorry for myself. And I honestly didn't want to get better. I just didn't want to live in this world anymore. And I didn't care about anything or anyone. And it wasn't until I took responsibility for my emotions that I wanted to get better. Like you said, when we talk about on the film, especially when we're around the Cape Horn, I think, I don't know. I think that's what it comes down to for me is like me as a person, I'm responsible for my own emotions. If I'm feeling that way, it's my job to not feel that way, to try and get better. It's not anybody else's. It's nobody else's job to make me want to live in this world. It's up to me. And if I don't want to live in this world, then nothing anyone says can ever make me want to live in this world again. Nothing at all. We talk about that a lot on the boat. So we have a lot of people that'll reach out, or their wives or family members will reach out and ask if they come sail with us. I'm like, if they don't want to get better right now, there's nothing we can do.
Yeah.
You have to be responsible for how you feel, and you have to want to get better before you can get better. And that's what it was for me. That's the best way I can describe it. It wasn't until I knew how I was feeling and I recognized it and named it and wanted to be better and wanted to live in this world again. It took sailing for me to see beauty in this world again, to want to stay alive, to see it again, to keep seeing how gorgeous this world is. Because when you're in that darkness, all you see is just nasty. It's disgusting. You don't want to be a part of this world. So I think the best thing you can do if somebody's in that state is to show them how pretty this world is again, and let them decide on their own terms that they want to live in it. But you can't force anybody to change that. It's got to be up to them, and you have to take responsibility for that.
Taylor, I work, I don't know if you know my backstory. My two boys are blind. They're in college now. They're doing really well. But as you can imagine, the majority of folks in this country and in this world that do lose their vision or are born blind are not having the level of success that my boys do. So I work with people in the blind community to have more success. And the number one thing that we teach them is it really is up to you. At the bottom of it all, it is 100% responsibility on you to make that choice, as we talk about with our Brilliantly Resilient listeners, to make the choice of whether you're going to rise or you're going to stay in that pit. However, and what you've already stated so eloquently through your different examples, when you have at least a tribe of one around you, that when you're ready to take 100% responsibility and there are people standing there or just one person that says, "Here, let me show you then. Let me open these doors for you. Let me give you the resources that you're ready force. So it is really, we should probably talk about this more in the work that we do with our folks that come to us in resilience, is it is a tribe that you need around you, but you have to make that choice yourself, that you're ready to receive all of that. Great point.
Yeah, absolutely.
So to that end, though, once you make that decision, and you guys talked about this when you met up with the British Army, I think it was, that they have a program. But it's one thing to make the decision. It's another thing to then know where to get help and to have help be available. And what do we have, or what don't we have?
Yeah, when we met the British in the Panama Canal, that was, Stephen and I say it was our greatest tragedy. Our transmission blew up on us halfway through, and of all the boats in the entire world in that exact moment, a boat full of active duty British Army guys sailed up next to us and towed us the rest of the way through the canal.
Wow.
That didn't make it in the documentary, but that was one of the moments where, like, I will never be able to explain that. But yeah, they saw our Mission 22 flag flying, and they knew what it was. They were like, "Oh, Mission 22, that's cool, man." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm just trying to raise awareness for veteran suicide and talk about PTSD." And they were like, "That is incredible." And I was like, "What the hell is active duty Army guys doing out here from England?" And they said that their unit, when they deployed to Iraq or Afghanistan, a third of their unit at a time is required to go on an adventure therapy expedition, whether it's sailing or hiking or camping.
Oh, wow.
And they rotate through. And he was like, some guys get blown up and get shot, and we want to make sure they're physically okay when they come back. But more importantly, if you're not shot or if you don't get blown up, we want to make sure you're mentally stable whenever you come back. We want to take care of each other and make sure you can still come to your job every day and be effective. I was like, that's freaking incredible, man. So when they come back from their deployments, they rotate through these 2-week expeditions, and they can choose which one they want to go to. And that's not specific to the UK. Israel does it. Israel has a bunch of really cool studies about adventure therapy. When their guys would come back from deployments, they'd put them on them. They've got a really good study that was a year long, where they actually used a sailing program and proved adventure therapy helps your body kind of heal itself. So there's other countries in the world that are doing this now, and it works. And it's kind of sad to talk about. Like, they've been doing this for years, for decades now. This research is out there. The means to heal is out there. We just haven't started doing it yet. We've talked to several congressmen here in Texas, anybody that would listen to us, about establishing these programs in our military. But, a lot of the answers we get is our military is just too big. We can never do something like that. It's the United States. I'm like, that's exactly why we could do it. We have plenty of money and resources. You know how much land
States. Yeah, this is the place where you go, we can't do that.
Right. Do you like how much land the military owns that you could start these programs? And then in that respect, there are thousands upon thousands of adventure therapy programs in the States that have popped up by veterans like us, because they've lost a lot of people to suicide, and they know adventure therapy works. So, you could do anything in this country. You can go on a week-long fly fishing trip. You can go horseback riding for a month through the mountains. Really great program, Heroes and Horses. These programs already exist by veterans that have come back to the States. Now we just need to figure out a way to implement these programs whenever active duty guys are getting out. It's not hard to do. Everything's already set up. All we have to do is start sending active duty guys to these programs around the States. And I think the solution there would be is if our government would just fund. If you're a veteran adventure therapy program, you're funded. Every single active duty member that we send to your program, they pay for them to get there, food and everything. I think that would do a lot. We would see suicide rates drop drastically, and that in itself, I think, is the biggest problem in our states. Is our country is very reactionary. So suicides, if you're having a hard time, they're like, "Oh, well, you should get counseling and try and help stop you from being homeless and doing drugs." And our thing is like, what if you catch people before that happens? What if you help people stay healthy before they even get that bad? Because once you're in that low spot, once you're already that low, it's going to be hard to catch them, So if you get people when they're already healthy and show them how to work with their body and that you can live again, be healthy, I think we'd see our numbers go way down. That was my rant. Sorry, I get super passionate. I get
No,
pissed off.
and
though, when I do
Exactly
it.
what we need. People need to hear this.
Yeah.
And from the mouth of someone who has quite literally been there and in that position.
You know, honestly, Taylor, you've got my brain firing. So I'm in the same mode with in the blind community. And here's what I want listeners to understand. And we can, I'm certainly open to talking with you guys about this in terms of veterans and PTSD. In the blind community, people say, oh, that doesn't impact me. I don't know anyone that's blind, and financially, you know, socially, that doesn't impact me. A study was just done in the United States. Blindness costs our socioeconomic programs $31.6 billion, right? I think it's something like 62% of that is mental health issues, suicides, addiction, all of that. I'd be very interested to see what the numbers are in terms of the military and veterans for PTSD. So people think that it doesn't impact us as a whole, and it's a huge crisis and impact that it really does. And exactly what you said, Taylor, to put that funding instead of reactionary into preventative and enhancing people's lives and allowing them the opportunity to come home and deal with this, and then uncover their brilliance and let them get out there in the world and do what their purpose is. What a whole different country we would be. I go into rants too.
It might be, but actually, that's actually a really good point, because it might be a practical way to bring attention to this and just compare the costs. You know, here's what it costs to deal with the mental health issues and the mental illness and all that kind of stuff and the homelessness and everything else. What if we get this before those are issues? What if we give people an opportunity to rebuild their lives so they don't have to go down that road and they don't need those kinds of services? But
you know, this is such an interesting, I didn't realize our conversation was going to go here, but it's like a full circle thing for everyone that's listening to this. No matter what your struggle is, if you put in and invest on the front end, like these skills that we talk about in living brilliantly resilient, if you invest on the front end in your mental health and having the right tools, the lack of costs and issues on the back end is huge. And like I said, you can be on your merry way to living your life's purpose and the dreams that you have, whatever they are. Man, it's kind of like we all had a pre-production meeting and said, let's tell the story this way. But it just also goes to show that resilience is resilience, and bouncing back, and all these tools all come together, no matter the big or small struggle. I don't want to say small struggle. What one person thinks might be a small struggle is a really big one, you know, in other people's minds. But it's all very similar, especially this investing on the front end.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I want to just, because we need to, I hate to say we need to wind up. I feel like I could talk to these guys for the whole rest of the day. But a couple of things that I want, first of all, I want people to see this movie because it is incredibly mesmerizing. And as I thought about the whole part of the whole journey, like at the very beginning, like you said, you found every hurricane that was anywhere on any ocean. They saw you guys and they're like, oh, we got to go over there. We got to get these guys. And it was like, to me, that was your mental state at the beginning of this whole thing. That was your brain at the beginning of this whole thing. It was just like a nonstop hurricane. And then as you went through and different things kind of stopped you in your tracks, and you experienced the doldrums, which like that had to be a part of your mental journey too. Like this kind of place of inertia, like I'm stuck. I'm not going to be able to go anywhere. Where am I going? And you literally were stuck at sea, like with no place to go. And then at the end of it, what I want to point out is that even when you got to the very end of the journey, there was still that frustration because the skies were cloudy and you wanted to see Cape Horn in the worst way. And then all of a sudden the sun came out, and you said God gave us a break after all. So it's just like the whole thing is such it's a poem in and of itself. It's an odyssey in and of itself that speaks to everything that you went through physically, everything that you went through emotionally. And then at the very end of it, you came out of it with this gorgeous scenery and this gorgeous view. And it was just like God shined a light on you. And you said in the movie, you chase everything you can in this world because you're alive in it. And I think that that's something that you can leave all of your veterans with, because you're still here, you're still alive, and there's still a journey worth taking. So I don't know. I was on a rant there too, wasn't I? Oh, no, you
Ladies
guys
and gentlemen,
Eric
inspire rants. You guys inspire rants. I don't know. So I guess just what I want to thank you for making such a beautiful movie. And I want to turn the opportunity back to you guys to, first of all, tell us where we can learn more about you, both of your work and what you're doing now, and anything else you want to throw at us right now.
Yeah, all our information's on the website, heartache.com, as well as where to watch the film. It's pretty readily available. Whatever your streaming platform is, story's all there. Yeah, we do have programs set up in ourselves, and we can put you in touch with programs if you're listening to this, if you're a veteran and you're where I was. We can help. You know, we have a sailing program down here in Texas called American Odysseus Sailing Foundation. We sail veterans and first responders. But there's a lot of programs all over Texas we can put you in touch with. I mean, we work with several around the country. So, yeah, if you're listening and you're wondering if you're alone, you're not. And we've got a whole team waiting to hear from you.
Love it. Stephen, anything you want to add?
You know, just that this documentary, you can find more information on hellerhighseas.com, but we're on Apple TV as well. I think it was maybe a week ago, Taylor sent me a screenshot showing us on the top documentaries on Apple TV if you're just scrolling through. So it's out there, it's easily accessible, and it's a film that changes lives.
I gotta tell you, it's mine.
Well, Stephen hates when I do this, but I'm dead serious. From the Land of Genesis, a book that he wrote. I think family members need to read it. It's the only way to really understand what your spouse or son or daughter are going through. I point people there a lot because I can't really describe it, but family members deal with this a lot. They deal with all the hard stuff. You know, they get pushed away by people that love them. And if you want to know why, if you want to know what that's like and understand it better, you should definitely read his book. It's incredible. That's why we did the trip. You know?
Well, I appreciate that. My son struggled with substance abuse for many, many years. And it is the family that wants so much to be there and wants so much to help and just doesn't often know how to do it. So that's Stephen, tell us a little bit about the book. Is that what the focus is? Yeah, absolutely. You know, at the time of me researching it, I was really seeing a lot of sensationalized material out there about veterans returning home. And PTSD, a lot of misconceptions. And so I wanted to tell the story of, you know, the average veteran, somebody coming home and what their experience is like and what their relationships are like and their interaction with their family and their home and how they, you know, not necessarily overcome PTSD, but learn how to live with it and learn how to become themselves, you know, even though that they've changed.
And tell us the name of the book again, Land of Genesis?
From the Land of Genesis.
From the Land of Genesis.
And that's on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. It's on our website as well. So if you just go to hellerhighseas.com, I'm sure you can find it somewhere on there.
Awesome.
Stephen O'Shea, Taylor Grieger, we are so delighted that you joined us today to shine a light on this really important issue. The film is Hell or High Seas, and it is just incredible. I urge everybody to go out there and see it. We can put you in touch with these guys. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for the work that you do. Thank you for making such an incredible film. It is life-changing. And as a sister, a sister-in-law, and a daughter of veterans, I thank all of the veterans for your service to our country, and to you guys for your service to our veterans and the rest of our country with the work that you're doing now. We really appreciate you. It is so needed, and we appreciate that you're serving in this way. And for all of you that are still trying to figure out how to take the next step in your own hero's journey, whether you're in the pit or you're on the rise and need a few people in your tribe or resources, go to brilliantlyresilient.net, blink 3 times, and a magic box appears where you can put your email in and we'll send it out to you all. Thanks so much for joining us again. We'll see you next time. Everybody. Bye, guys.
Thank you
for having us.